The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
Faster Mike, good afternoon. Welcome to Mannin Line on Manx Radio. Well, one of Key's most prominent backbenchers is on Mannin Line today. Former Minister David Ashford, MHK, is with us. Previous to being in Keys, he was a Douglas councillor for the best part of 9 years. Previously Mayor of the borough, Deputy Mayor too as well. So get some questions coming up about Douglas to the Douglas North MHK. And if you want to get in touch, text, email, call and WhatsApp. David Ashford is live on Mannin Line today. Faster Mike, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Andy.
Good to see you. And lots has been happening. There's an enormous amount of things that we can talk about, and I've got lots of questions. So let's get to the phones straight away. And Mark, good afternoon. Faster Mike, you're live with David Ashford.
Yeah, hi Andy, how are you? Hi David.
Hi Mark.
I just got back from the island, Andy, and on the island, and I listened to a recording of the Tynwald questions yesterday on about reference Crogga and Chris Thomas's responses, and it just seems to me, I wanted to get David's opinion on this, it just seems to me, especially when Mr. Wallenberg sort of raised the question about the procrastination and the lack of ability to move forward, because it just seems to me that both parties aren't communicating. And I think that Chris Thomas sort of didn't manage to answer the question when he actually last met with Crogga, which I understand, I've heard before, is back in October, November 22. So, and it also seems to be a real misunderstanding from the government department, because they won't meet with Crogga, that's my understanding, about what Phase C means. And, you know, they keep talking about Phase C. Well, Phase C is drilling is an appraiser well plus an exploration well. And Crogga aren't wanting to do an exploration well, they're just wanting to do an appraiser well initially. And it's just that lack of engagement, which is really, really frustrating. And if I can ask one other question, not related to Crogga, if that's okay, and I'll bugger off. It's just, I was looking at the budget as well, I know, David, because I know you raised severe queries with regards to the Minister of Treasury on dipping into the reserves. And I looked on the government website, and there's a line item in gross income called the healthcare funding gap, which is in the income section of the pink slip, I think it's called, which basically means that the government are short of £172 million from the years 24 to 28, and they just put it in the income section as a healthcare funding gap. And I presume that's to do with dipping into the government reserves. And I don't know if he's got a view on that, being the former Treasury Minister, but I really appreciate his views on those two items. And I'll shut up now.
David?
Yeah, so if I can take the Crogga first, I mean, I'm concerned now that this seems to be just going into the long grass. I did meet with the CEO of Crogga to discuss this because I had concerns, and the main thing seems to be boiling down to whether or not before the appraisal well there needs to be a 3D survey rather than relying off the 2D survey from BP. But what seems to be happening is there's no communication. A decision just needs to be made. If the decision is that the 3D survey must be done first, we'll communicate that to Crogga. Go back and actually say it. I mean, Crogga wrote to the Minister, I believe, on the 8th of June. They also wrote on the 15th of June, I believe, requesting an all-parties meeting. And I hope that all-parties meeting will actually take place, because the only way I can see this being resolved is actually getting everyone face-to-face in a room. Because I believe the last time the Minister met with them face-to-face, I think, was October. I think you're right on that. That's the date I had in my head as well. And this is dragging on and dragging on. And I think we are at risk of missing a huge potential opportunity for the island. The fact that the Minister admitted yesterday that we've known for 6 years that we don't have the appropriate drilling regulations in law, that's, to be honest, something we should have been looking at, because if everything had gone smoothly and say we hadn't had a pandemic pandemic in the middle, then we'd now be at the stage potentially where they'd be wanting to drill with absolutely no drilling regulations. So this should have been dealt with ages ago.
Okay, and the second bit about reserve.
The healthcare funding gap. The healthcare funding gap is basically the figure. When the Sir Jonathan Michael review was done, there was a figure as to how healthcare inflation should be worked going forward, and the funding gap is what is predicted to be the gap between the budgets now and where the budgets need to be in 5 years' time. And I have serious concerns about it because it is continuously growing. It's gone up dramatically this year, as you say, to about the 172 million. And there's no real explanation as to how that's going to be plugged over the next 5 years, and it actually needs to be, because the Sir Jonathan Michael calculations were quite clear that if we're wanting to maintain the health service in the state that it currently is, that's the type of funding we've got to be looking at.
Okay, final word, Mark.
Yeah, I think I have really good comments, and what I mean about the communication element with Crogga. What I did find concerning is Chris Thomas said that they're going to have a meeting and he'll be observing. And I just think, to be honest, I think given the importance of Crogga, there's just a lack of leadership at the moment.
Yeah, I think there needs to be political involvement in this.
Absolutely,
it's a national matter and it's of great importance to the island.
Yeah, my gut feeling is it's not going to happen now. I think it's been dragging on too long, and it's just it's such a shame that there's been a lack of leadership in terms of moving it forward. I mean,
I like to always remain optimistic, and I hope there is something that can be salvaged from it. I know, Crogga is keen to progress things. But like I say, we may get to the appraisal well stage and they might find there's nothing there that can be extracted at a commercial flow. But we don't know until we try, and I just worry that there's one thing after another that seems to be actually slowing this down.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Right, yeah, it's good to hear from you. Infrastructure is an enormous department. Some people say it's too big. So Mr. Thomas has got... I remember Mr. Thomas has picked up a lot of this from previous administrations. He's got the promenade, the rest of the promenade, the horse trams to look at. He's got the Liverpool landing stage. There's the chaos at the airport as well. So who's driving this Crogga thing? Is this bureaucrats who are looking after the Crogga thing, or do you think Mr. Thomas has political involvement in this?
Well, it'll be the officers that will be leading on it, because obviously that is the day-to-day job. Right. The licence sits with DOI. They need themselves to have obviously specialist advisors, because it is a very specialist area.
Well, they can't blame previous administrations, can they?
Well, it does go back into the last administration, to be fair, as well. But I do think that now there needs to be some political leadership, some political involvement to try and drive this forward. I don't envy Chris with the workload he's got on at DOI. As you say, much of this goes back many, many years, not just to the last administration, but administrations before, where the can has been very firmly kicked down the road. But what this administration needs to ensure it does is it actually gets action on things, that it starts moving things on, because otherwise, if we do end up with inertia, then actually there'll be things that just will not get done and things that won't progress in the way that they should for the benefit of the people of the island.
The elephant in the room is the green lobby. It's the net zero lobby. Is there any element of government procrastinating because of perceived opposition from the green lobby? I
haven't seen that, I must be honest. I've always been quite clear. I was one of the few candidates at the election that actually came out and publicly said that I supported Crogga. There was a few candidates that sat on the fence, but I very, very clearly nailed my colours to the mast. I think that actually gas is going to be still a mix, whether we like it or not, of our fuel supply for at least the next 20 to 30 years, whether we like it or not. And I think that if this opportunity is there, the island should be seizing it.
OK. Hi, Howard. You're live with David Ashford, MHK.
Hello, Andy. Hello, David.
Hi, Howard.
You covered a lot of ground there that I was going to ask questions on. Crogga in particular. I think, as you rightly said, Chris Thomas has been given what used to be, pardon this, the Manx Care, Manx NHS. That was the poison chalice, but now the DOI seems to be the poison chalice. And everything that seems to get touched within that group, whether it be civil service, ministers, otherwise, always ends up running around like headless chickens. We've got so many schemes in being at the moment, unfinished or in such a state that they can't be finished. So the Crogga, when Phil Gorn, many, many years ago, introduced the seabed, what do you call it? Oh, Lord, the old brain has gone.
Oh, the mineral rights.
Yeah,
mineral rights. A lot of this should have been put into groundwork because 20 years ago or more, there were people out there, companies out there drilling. So there must be somewhere a wedge of information that leads to what would be the present day drilling. So why has this been held back so much with Crogga? Which is it's dreadful when even if you only pick up a few million from it, that few million will be going into the coffers of the Manx treasury and could be a great help to the people on the island. Yet somewhere within DOI, there's somebody there with a brick wall and it's not allowing it to go any further.
Yeah. And I think that's why there needs to be that all-party meeting that Crogga's asked for, and there does need now, I think, to be political intervention as well. I think a decision just needs to be made, whatever that decision may be. I mean, I'm clear on what I think, but from my point of view, what should happen. But in terms of government, it just needs to make a decision and communicate that to Crogga one way or the other. Are they going to vary the licence so that they don't have to do the 3D survey, or are they going to stick with the licence and say, no, if you're going to progress the appraisal well, you've got to actually do the 3D survey. That way all parties know what they're working with and can move forward. But while there's indecision, everyone's stuck in limbo, and that limbo now needs to be broken.
Okay,
You're right. Just one other question, David. When the Manx government several years ago borrowed £400 million, supposedly at a fixed low rate interest, does that low rate interest still standing now that the interest rates are moving? And how much of that pot has been used and how much is left?
Yep, so in terms of that, the interest rate is fixed, so it wasn't a variable rate on the green bonds as it was. It was a fixed rate of interest, so that interest still applies. So actually it was a very good deal, because if you actually look at the way the money markets moved, they got the lowest rate of interest it was possible to do. They actually got it right at the bottom of the market. So it was a really good timing. In terms of the amount of money left, I must confess I don't have the figure off the top of my head, because there was transactions in and out, because some of it was used to rebalance the steam packet and also the MUA, but that money then came back through into Treasury. So I stand to be corrected, but I think there's still about 350 million of it sat there.
So that's quite a good sum at a low rate of interest that's holding the books together within Treasury.
The problem is it is earmarked, so it can't be used just as the general reserve. It is actually there, and there was very specific purposes around sustainability. It was a sustainable bond, so it is actually very limited on what it can be spent on. They can't just put it into the general reserve and say that's a top up to the figure that we've got there.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Andy. Thanks,
Howard.
David.
Yeah, good to hear from you. Thanks for that. Shirley's on now. Hi, Shirley. You're live with David Ashford.
Hiya. First of all, it's actually nothing to do with... It's something to do with EasyJet, but I wanted first of all to say how lovely to hear David's voice. I was working up the hospital for years, and David was an absolute amazing person to have popping into the hospital all the time. He was just absolutely fantastic. I wish he was in charge of the airport now, because I think that would be sorted out if he was there. But you know, that's another thing. So it's lovely to hear him on the radio. First of all, I use EasyJet quite a lot now. My son's moved over to Liverpool, and I go away about every third week to Liverpool and come back. I don't mind going to the airport and being delayed a little bit. I don't mind having to pay for it. But every time I go now, I normally go out on the first plane. I know that I'm not going to fly on time. I know that when I'm coming back, I'm going to be sitting in Liverpool Airport for hours, and this goes on every single time. My son is the same. He comes over here every 2 weeks. He normally, between 3 and 5 hours, he'll be delayed. Sometimes when he comes on that first plane, it's supposed to land at 7:40. It can't land or something, and it has to circle up above for ages. And one of the taxi drivers told me it's because there's no one in the air traffic control place to see it in. I just wonder, EasyJet I haven't really got a problem with, because once you get on the plane, I think the staff are lovely, I think the flights are lovely. All they need to sort out is this nonsense where you go over there and you sit for ages and they keep saying delayed, and then they do the same when we're coming back. If they could sort that out, as I say, the plane and the staff are fine, but this is just a joke. And as for saying we should have our own insurance, I've got yearly travel insurance. That doesn't help when you're sitting at the airport, and I just don't know who to get in touch with about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the big problem, because for a lot of people, I mean, it's all very well putting the message out there and saying people should be appropriately insured so they can look after themselves. But at the end of the day, for most people, it's not about the money and the insurance. It's about the disruption and the inconvenience when they're trying to get somewhere. That's the issue. And the problem mainly is the restricted runway hours. I've spoken to people who work in the air industry, and one of the big problems is, I did a quick check ahead of Keys Question Time where I had a question down yesterday for this, and I found just in 15 minutes looking at 3 EasyJet routes, 10 flights that can't, with the current times, take off on time or arrive on time because they're right in the middle of a runway closure time, and because they've got the 15-minute lag beforehand as well, which they're required to do in case a flight needs to come back, that takes another 4 that would potentially fall in there. So that's only 3 routes I've looked at, and that's nearly 14 flights.
I can't understand it, because, as I say, EasyJet themselves, I can't complain about their planes and their staff, but this is just nonsense the way this is going on.
Yeah, so what's to do?
So, well, I think the first thing that needs to be done is we need to actually engage with the airlines. Now, I know the Minister says there's been lots of engagement as well, but we need to try and ensure that even if they can just move the flight times or something like that to try and help ease some of the congestion, we need to maybe look at working with them around their flight crewing times as well. But the main critical thing, which I know the airport is working hard on, is getting the appropriate number of air traffic controllers. But the point I made yesterday in Keys is this is something that has not just happened overnight, and I know there's international reasons as well where there's a shortage, but this is something that's been building up, as far as I can see, for a number of years. And what we need to do is understand what actually caused this in the first place, and what we're going to do to make sure we don't end up in this situation again. I've got to be honest, there isn't at the moment a real easy fix, because obviously EasyJet and the way their business model quite rightly works is, in order to meet the margins, they've got to keep aircraft in the sky. So they can't have aircraft sat on the runway at Ronald's Way, because that aircraft, after it's dropped you at Liverpool or Manchester, might be going on to Rome. So I don't think there is a quick fix, because the fix is actually to have the appropriate number of air traffic controllers. But I think we do need to engage with those airlines and see if there's anything that they feel would actually help alleviate it, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are trying to get the passengers from A to B. And the airlines don't want to be running late either, because that has a knock-on effect then to the rest of their timetable.
Okay, all right, thanks Shirley.
Rightio, thanks Sam, thank you, bye-bye.
Good to hear from you. But David Ashford, as you said, this has been years coming. This has been years, and I think the official figure is at 15.7 air traffic controllers we have to have, and we've got about 8 now, so we're a little over 50%. So we're not blaming the air traffic controllers, it's their job. We're not blaming anybody else at the airport, because that's the hand they got dealt with. But surely this should have been seen. Surely somebody knew this was going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this formed part of my questioning yesterday in House of Keys, because the figure, I believe, Andy, is we've got 10 in total, 8 which are operational, and 2, for whatever reasons we don't know, aren't operational.
I think they're not fully trained.
And then we've got 4 in training as well. So once their training's complete, that takes us up to 14. But we do need to look at what actually went wrong, because it's all well and good saying there's other airports in the UK that actually have have some restrictions on them. But of course, as the old phrase goes, alternative airports are available. On the island, there isn't. This is our one route in and out by air, and we need to ensure that we have that, we have that flexibility and we have that robustness, because it is dependent not just for individuals travelling, but also businesses as well.
Okay.
So there's the economic impact.
We're live with David Ashford between now and 1. You want to get in touch? Text, email, call and WhatsApp.
You can get the best of everything, and the price is just as nice. Oh, I'm so glad we went to Pacesetter. The perfect shower, some great tiles, all the accessories we needed. They had it all. Amazing ranges from traditional to modern, many exclusive to Pacesetter. Get your bathroom on song. Visit the Pacesetter showrooms at Harris Terrace and Spring Valley.
You can get the best of everything, where the price is twice as nice.
Nearly as good as me.
Ramsey Garden Centre opens 7 days a week for roses, shrubs, trees, perennials and an array of pond plants. Or if it's fire pits or solar lights, there's never been a better time to visit Ramsey Garden Centre.
Cancer Research UK's Relay for Life is back. Don't miss your chance to honour everyone who's been affected by cancer and the progress made in research. Unite with family and friends, set your team fundraising goal and join a celebration of community fundraising. Search Relay for Life Isle of Man and enter for free today. The Relay for Life, 26th August at the National Sports Centre. Your chance to help beat cancer.
The race is on to help members of our elderly community, and you can help win it. The KPMG Promenade Relay takes place along Douglas Seafront on Friday 7th July, with 100% of entry fees and sponsorship going to Live at Home, supporting elderly islanders to live happily at home for as long as possible. Get your relay team of 2 to 4 people together to tackle the 10k course, or go it solo over 5k. Entries close 5th July. Visit home.kpmg/CDS for details and registration. The KPMG Promenade Relay is supported by your nation station, Manx Radio.
Weekend or workend, you're tuned to the Sunday Chill Out Show with Chris Pearson on Manx Radio.
Every Sunday night, we bring the Ibiza beach vibe to the shores of the Isle of Man for those long, light summer evenings. Brought to you by Spectrum Windows. We mix up classic chill beats with the coolest new cuts right here on the nation station, Manx Radio. Join me to chill Sunday evenings from 7.
The Sunday Chill Out.
The Mannin Line with Andy Wint.
29 minutes after 12. Bonzo. Hi, Bonzo. You're live with David Ashford, MHK.
Hello there. Yes, Mr. Ashford. Crogga, you were mentioning that you'd recently met the CEO, Richard Hubbard. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right, yes.
Right, yes. Are you aware of Mr. Hubbard's checkered past with Statoil after BP?
I'm not. I must be honest. I met with him in his role as CEO of Crogga so that we could actually chat about things.
Right. Well, I shall update you, and indeed, Andy Wint has the relevant web link to the relevant published material, which just the most cursory search on Google you could find in a couple of minutes. In that, after his time at BP, he then went to Statoil, the Norwegian previously state-owned oil company, where he was then involved in a bribe scandal involving oil deals in Iran, which were still just about legal at that time before the US sanction regime, I think, in 2006. That then led to him being faced by, as well as Statoil, by the Norwegian authorities. Statoil was fined 20 million kroner, and he himself was fined 200,000 kroner. So, I think this begs the question. Firstly, those members in Dimwald who seem to be very enthusiastic about Crogga, have they done really their due diligence on the company? And secondly, I think the question would then be raised by anyone seeing this kind of material. Well, are these the kind of people that the Isle of Man should be doing business with?
Well, I can say from my experience, and I can only talk from my experience, of course, from what I've seen of Crogga and the way it's set up, personally, I am quite content with the way it's set up. Obviously, it's a private company. It has to comply with the regulations in the licence, so it's not a free-for-all for them. There are very big restrictions in the licence as to what they need to go through, and this is one of the hold-ups at the moment, where there needs to be a decision made. Do they need to do the full 3D survey first, or can they just go off the 2D survey? Like I say, whichever way that goes, we just need a decision so that everyone knows one way or the other. And I think, from that point of view, you then can move forward in terms of the company itself. From what I have physically seen of the company itself, I think it is something we should be exploring, and it is something we should be moving forward. But the important thing is the regulation around that, and that's one of the things I've been pushing about with the drilling regulations, because to get to this stage and not have appropriate drilling regulations in place, knowing we haven't had them for 6 years, is absolutely ridiculous, because if things are done, they do have to be tightly controlled and tightly regulated.
Well, given that, I believe that there have been questions asked about the share offer, which has then had funding returned to investors. Even during the time it was being heavily advertised on Manx radio and elsewhere as an offer we can't afford to miss, etc. A variety of people were citing that this may be in breach of FSA regulations. And also, I think some of the ideas about Crogga and the licence as well. Any time there seems to be a problem for Crogga, they scream and insist the terms of the licence be changed. Now, that it then uses, essentially political blackmail in order to encourage Tynwald to then change the terms of the licence. So these are not people who like adhering to terms, by the sound of it.
In terms of the licence, the only way it can be changed is by DOI, who's the licence holder, and that has to be done off specialist advice. So it's not a case of politicians deciding to change the terms of the licence. It would need to come off the specialist advice. What they're looking, I believe, to do with the licence is to be able to go off the 2D survey. DOI and the special advice may well come back and actually say, no, there needs to be the full 3D survey for X reasons, and lay out those reasons. But that's what I'm pushing for. I'm not saying the decision should be one way or the other. What I'm saying is there just needs to be an actual decision.
Well, the specialist advice, of course, that can be provided to a minister can accept advice in part or in whole or decline it.
Yeah, and they can, but I think certainly in relation to this, I think it'd be a very brave minister that actually declined specialist advice, because they would be exposed themselves to making the decision. I would hope that any minister would accept any specialist advice they're given in this area, but the important thing is that a decision is made, because at the moment the procrastination over it is not helping anyone.
Okay, all right, Bonzo, thanks for that.
Okay then, thanks. Bye.
Good to hear from you. And of course, the conduct of Crogga Limited is down to the shareholders.
Exactly,
and the
it's a private company.
Of Crogga, it is a private company, and as at the moment, not a penny of public money is being committed to this, other than the administration of the licence through DOI. Now, here's a message from Stan, who just says, obviously Douglas North is where Mr. Ashford is, but he was, and I mentioned you were mayor of Douglas as well. And I think you were mayor of Douglas. Lord Street had only been a barren site for about 10 years. And we're still with the Lord Street bus station. Can anybody make any sense of what used to be a fine bus station, an air terminal once upon a time, and now just seems to be a muddy car park? Yeah,
I mean, it's disappointing that it hasn't been developed. I understand that the company obviously involved, they've come up against a lot of challenges again. The pandemic was a big challenge for them. But, I am disappointed that site hasn't been developed, because I've said for years, and I think, I spoke about this on Manx Radio when I was a Douglas councillor, which was 7 years ago since I've left the council, that it's a prime site down there. That is a main interchange, and I believe we should be making more of Lord Street for our interchange for the bus network as well. So the fact it's actually derelict down there, or empty anyway, I think actually is a problem.
Can the council do anything about it?
Well, no, it's a vacant site, so the council's powers are in relation to dilapidated buildings. There is no dilapidated building on the site. It is privately owned. Obviously, Mr. Thomas mentioned in Key, it was not this week, I think it was a previous sitting, might have been the last Tynwald sitting, about the issues with car parking on the site. I made various comments around that. But I think, development of that site is absolutely key, because I think that would then drive development of the other sites across the way, such as the old police station and Cambrian Place.
And other derelict sites around. I don't know, you can tell me, because candidates and MHKs know the fine details of their constituency. Does Summerland come in Douglas North?
No, Summerland is Douglas East. It used to be the old Victoria Ward, so I used to have that in my...
You were Victoria Ward.
I was Victoria Ward councillor, and the boundaries used to be, they're matched up now, but they used to be slightly different for council.
OK, what you're thinking about Summerland? What do you think should happen?
Summerland is always a difficult one, because quite rightly it invokes a lot of emotion, and particularly for obvious reasons this year.
50th anniversary.
I've believed that there should be a monument on the site when it is developed. There is obviously the main monument that Douglas Council has done in the Kay Memorial Gardens, but I believe if the site is ever developed, then there should be a monument there. I've got to be honest and say I wouldn't mind seeing residential built on there, but there is all the issues with the cliff face as well, and I know that's been an issue for the residents above for many, many years. There's been various legal injunctions and so on that cliff face, and it is a difficult site to develop.
Must have been 15 years ago. There was a bid, there was a planning application went in, wasn't there?
The Wave, if I remember correctly, was the plan, and unfortunately it did get nowhere. I think the big problem that's always come up against the site is there would have to be a lot of money spent up front in terms of doing the surveys on the cliff face, and that's why there's always been a problem, I think, with private development coming forward for that site, because they do have to spend an awful lot of money up front and potentially unknown amounts to potentially stabilise the cliff face.
OK, a message in from Wendy, who just said Mr. Ashford was talking about you mentioned the word crisis recently about our reserves. That's a very dark word to mention, and as a former Treasury Minister, we take it seriously.
It is, and I don't use the word lightly, Andy, to be honest. I always choose my words very carefully, and I've got serious concerns, because our reserve fund at the moment I think stands around about 658 million in the general reserve, but if you look at the pink book presented this year, that actually is going to dwindle down to the prediction now at the end of this administration to be about 241.4 million. Now that might sound a lot to a lot of people, but if you take some of the contingencies that happen across government, it'll soon disappear. And one of the problems is what those reserves mainly are being used for isn't one-off projects, it's to cover day-to-day spending, and that spending occurs year on year. So I really worry that we are getting to a point where the reserves at the end of this administration are going to be far, far too low compared to where they are. And even if they meet their financial plan, and at the end of this administration it's a balanced book, they'll have spent 200 million in reserves and be returning about 2 million a year to the reserves. So that would take 100 years to get us back. Just to the 400 million where in the 21 budget it would have been.
David Ashford, are we in trouble?
I don't think at this stage we are. And the reason I say that is I think as long as we start tackling it now, then there's not an issue. And this is what I raised in Tynwald with the Treasury plan. Now, I know since it's been mentioned the alternative is austerity. Well, what will actually cause austerity is if nothing's done during this administration about it, the next administration comes in and suddenly realises the reserves are massively depleted and they have to take drastic action in one go. What we need to be doing is we need to be looking at our tax strategy. We need to be looking at the level of income that we actually bring into the island, how we can generate that, and then also how the money is spent. So it's not just a case of one side or the other. We need to have an overall plan, and that's what I'm pushing for.
So since it was 1984, wasn't it, the big crunch, 1984, 2,000 people out of work on the Isle of Man, £1 million in reserves, and we were literally going from month to month with welfare payments. So backs against the wall, the Isle of Man fought its way out of it. We had non-stop growth, the envy of the Western world and other places. Is this the end of the good times? Should we get used to this now?
I think, like I say, I don't think it's at a point where it's not fixable at the moment. I think, I don't want to be completely downcast about it, but what needs to happen is we need to now be bringing forward, and it's what we spoke at the start, this administration, yes, it's inherited an awful lot from previous administrations, but this needs to be the one that drives things forward, and that includes having that debate with the general public about how we raise and spend tax, where our revenue streams are coming from. As an island, we have proved since 1984 to be remarkably adaptable as an economy. We've seen things coming miles away, like the finance industry, and rather controversially sometimes with some people, e-gaming, and we've been ahead of the curve. That's what we need to be doing again, but we need to have those honest conversations with people around tax and spend. And, it's not something that can be done in, say, the last 2 years of this administration. It needs a longer lead-in time. So I'm not shouting doom everywhere. I'm saying, come on, we need to focus our minds, and this is the point to start driving things forward.
Okay, well, you were part of the last administration under Mr.
I was
Quayle,
indeed, yeah.
So did you see things like this coming?
Yeah, well, one of the reasons we commissioned the Sir Jonathan Michael Review, because I was health and social care, of course, in the previous administration, was we recognised that potentially the way we were doing things and the money we were spending on the health service was unsustainable. We needed to look at a better model. I used the phrase, and I think I surprised a few people many times in Tynwald, where I said I wasn't a health minister who kept saying give more money and that'll fix the problem, because I always said I recognised that every penny we spent on health was a penny that couldn't be spent on police, couldn't be spent on other education, DOI, other services that are key to government as well. So there's been financial plan after financial plan since the VAT bombshell of 2008, but they haven't brought the budget back into balance, and this, unfortunately, like I say, a lot of it's inherited, but this is the administration that has to grasp that nettle and do it.
OK, 17 minutes to 1. We're live with David Ashford, MHK, on Mannin Line.
We all like to live in the moment. Impromptu drinks, long evenings down Kirkmichael, family barbecues.
Who fancies a dip?
Me! We like to keep our options open, but the trick to keeping your options open is actually a bit of forward planning too. Why not make a plan with your very own HSBC Relationship Manager? Talk to us about financial planning. HSBC, opening up a world of opportunity.
Investment involves risk. The amount initially invested may not be received back. HSBC Bank PLC Isle of Man branch is regulated by the Isle of Man Financial Services Authority. Visit the HSBC website for terms and eligibility requirements.
Every drop is precious. Water. So easy to take it for granted, isn't it? Our reservoirs supply the needs of our island, but with the effects of climate change, that's becoming more challenging every year. Manx water is the only water we have, so we need to make every drop count by using it wisely, at home, in the garden and in general. Visit manxutilities.im to find out how you can begin smarter living, to lower energy bills and reduce your impact on our island environment.
TGI Fridays, Harry Ramsden's, Greg's, Chiquito. They're each loved for food and enjoyment. And now they've all teamed up with Iceland to bring their famous food direct to you. Piccolino, My Protein and many more, all in one place. Shop right, so anytime you're craving for what makes them famous, we can help. No defrost, no prep, no waste. Straight from the freezer into the oven. And all at great prices. New exclusive brands. Only at ShopRite. Proudly locally owned.
Jump aboard the time train and take a trip back to the 1960s on Carnaby Street every Saturday morning at 8:30 with Isle of Man Railways. It's full of 60s hits and memories. On board the time train, Gladys the tea lady.
Right, boys?
Harry the driver.
Hello, crispy old mate.
Roger the fire firemen.
All aboard Isle of Man Railway's time train.
Oh, and Raffles the dog. And of course you and me. You can win tickets for two for one of the Isle of Man Railway's fantastic dining car experiences. Carnaby Street, 8:30 on Manx Radio, on AM, FM, online, on smart speakers and all over the world at manxradio.com.
The Mannin Line. Daily interaction, debate and exchange of ideas. Broadcast on Manx Radio from midday till 1, Monday to Friday.
14 minutes before now, live with David Ashford, MHK. And Steve, hi, you're live with David Ashford.
How are you doing? You okay? Hi, David.
Hi, Steve.
Hey, boy, you all right? Now, this isn't directed at you, David, but it is at the government. They ripped Summerland to pieces and flattened it to the floor. Not them personally, but the tradespeople rip it to the floor and leave it there for years and years and years. They cry, I haven't got any money, the government. Oh, we'll build houses on the site. What an absolute waste of people's time and money. Now, I'll tell you, let me get into this now. Why, and I mean why, keep building houses, try to get people over here when we can't get the things over here for the people that are already here? Now, what I mean by this is, spend money to make money. I've put money where my mouth is. Let's see the government. I'll give you an idea. If you build an indoor recreation centre, just let me pick one thing, indoor battery go-karting centre, you could build a world-class centre down there. People would come over for championships to be held in the indoor go-kart centre. In the UK, people pay up the Isle of Man. Lots of people go away. Corporate dudes, officers, we all go away and do indoor kart racing, battery-powered. It's a massive, massive industry. You could build down there, the government, spend money and build a fantastic world-class piece of kit down there. That people would come over. You get championships held in the Isle of Man. Money, spending. Never mind people on the Isle of Man using it every weekend, going down, having such a good laugh. The government say no. What we'll do is we'll try and contract out to a private. Now, I've had Roller City, Hovercart City. What booked me is I spend my money. If it wasn't for COVID, we'd be still going now, but COVID killed. Now, we can't blame COVID. What annoys me is private people come along, spend thousands of pounds doing something, and the government, you're taxing them this, you're taxing them that, they're getting all the charge off the business. It's business. It's not about people doing it privately. The government should do something down that site. They took it away for whatever reason. They should put something there for the people of the Isle of Man to use, David. This is what I get passionate about.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I do think it is something that should be with the private sector, but I think it should be a government-private partnership for trying to provide things more socially. Because, I mean, Summerland, one of the issues with Summerland was losing £1 million a year, I think it was, at the point it actually closed. But I fully agree with you. We need more facilities on Ireland, because there's no point just bringing up houses and then people getting over here and finding that there's nothing for them to do. And we also need to fix the services for people that are here first. I've been very passionate in Tynwald of saying we need to invest in things like our GP surgeries to make sure they can cope with population growth beforehand. But when it comes to things like indoor arenas, there's lots of vacant sites around Douglas that do need to be developed. That's something I've been shouting about since I was a Douglas councillor. And I think it is best left to the private sector, but I think there is ways government can help support the private sector in that regard. And I think, I'd like to see more sort of focus schemes from DFA that people can actually use to try and help them develop in that area.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Good to hear. Well, again, this goes back to the fact that back in the 80s, when we were effectively almost broke, but there were things that were remnants of the tourist industry that people used to use. And lots of things have just gone. You were involved in the nightclub industry for a long time. And there are probably a third of the number of nightclubs there used to be. You go to Jersey, there's a 10-screen cinema there, and we've got, two old, well, there's a small new one inside Broadway, but we have an old cinema there. So, we don't have those glitzy things that people like to have as part of their social life.
And that's something I've been shouting about in Tynwald, Andy, that, in terms of the hospitality sector, if we are going to encourage more businesses into the island, and we are going to encourage more people, people, we need to have a vibrant hospitality sector. And I do worry about the impact that COVID had on the hospitality sector, and a lot of the businesses still haven't recovered from that. And what we need to ensure is that there is government support there for that sector, because if there isn't, and you mentioned there, obviously need to declare an interest in the fact that I am quite close to the sector, but in a nightclub industry, for instance, you mentioned there about a third. I don't think it's even a third of, if you went back 20 years ago. I had this conversation with a taxi driver a few months ago where we listed off all the clubs and everything there was 20 years ago.
You started off at Port Jack, you had the Cave at one end and Jefferson's at the other.
Yeah, you'd be lucky to be able to call in at every single one, to be honest. And that has radically changed, but there needs to be something to help support that vibrant hospitality industry to get it on its feet, because if there isn't and we lose any more of the hospitality industry, it'll be a chicken and egg situation where you won't encourage people over if they haven't got something to be coming over to.
OK, and a message in from Barry who just says, have you given evidence to the COVID inquiry yet?
I haven't as yet. I believe I'm due to... They haven't given me a firm date yet. I believe I'm due to give evidence in either end of August, start of September. But I provided plenty of documentation, including about 30,000 emails.
OK. And how much can and can't you say, says Barry, about the Rosalind Ranson affair?
Well, obviously, I can't talk about what's actually going on at the moment. The second hearing is still to be decided by the tribunal, so I have to steer clear of that because it is before effectively a court. But obviously I can talk about the initial hearing.
OK. What were your thoughts on that?
So the initial hearing, I've always been quite clear on it, Andy. I think Rosalind Ranson's owed a massive apology for some of the things that happened to her. It was absolutely horrific, some of the stuff that came out during evidence about her having her office removed from her, having her staff removed from her, being belittled. I was the minister at the time, and there's no getting away from that. I haven't tried to avoid that. And as the minister at the time, I think she is owed a massive apology.
Can you clarify, this is a message in from Mark who just said, can you clarify the conditions of Catherine Magson's employment? Who employed her?
So she was seconded from her job in the UK. My understanding of it was she was seconded from her job in the UK to operate as CEO as DHSC. So she was actually effectively employed by Isle of Man government during that period.
And did we pay her?
We paid her.
And that was it a health authority in England?
No, so she was seconded from us being CEO of a health authority in England.
OK, and we got this is from Paul, who says, could you tell me, it's Timble Day next Wednesday, what do MHKs do in the summer?
Although we don't have the public sittings, everything else carries on. So all the constituency work, all the background stuff around committees. My diary for the summer is looking pretty full, let's put it that way. And for ministers, of course, all the departmental work carries on as well, and those who are members of departments, that all carries on day to day regardless. It is frustrating sometimes because people seem to talk about the summer recess as if we all go away for a jolly beach holiday or something for the whole summer. I can quite assure you it's not, and my hairline didn't get like this by not having anything to do in the summer.
All right, what are the hot topics in Douglas North at the moment?
So the hot topics, as always, is traffic. There's the redevelopment of Williston again. There's also the bus routes in Tremode, or lack of. They're the big constituency ones that keep coming up time and time again.
In terms of the school, I remember last time we talked about the school and temporary buildings. Is anything going to happen about those temporary buildings?
So I believe there's going to be a replacement of at least one of the mobiles with a new mobile. That's a great interim measure from my point of view, but what we need is physical brick build to expand Williston School. They've got absolutely no storage space in there. They've got the gym posts into the gym hall when they haven't got them out in the outside, and they also use that as the canteen. They need space.
More questions in about the airport, and you talked about the Enterprise, the Department for Enterprise, trying to get business into the Isle of Man. And it was just a question that came in from Elizabeth, who said, isn't the DOI tying Enterprise's feet together by if they're trying to get people in, and people sit on the tarmac in Gatwick and can't fly to the Isle of Man? What message does it send out?
Well, it sends out a very bad message, I'll be bluntly honest. I've spoken to businesses, some where they've actually abandoned bringing directors from the UK over because they can't rely on the flights getting in on time, or they can't rely on there being disruption. So this is why it needs to be fixed as a matter of urgency, because as I said earlier in the programme, Andy, it's not just individual travel, which is vitally important as well, people getting in and on and off the island. It's also business, and it will have a long-term effect on our economy if it's not fixed. The Minister claims there'll be changes by September, and I intend to hold him to his word, and I'll be monitoring closely.
OK, just a quick word about UCM, University College Isle of Man, which that's in Douglas North, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It is in Douglas North, at Greenfield Road. And the success that UCM has been, it's the transition from Isle of Man College to UCM. How do you see that?
Yeah, I think it has been a huge success. I mean, all the staff at UCM do deserve a great deal of praise. Everything has changed radically around them in the last sort of, I was going to say 10 years, but even in the last 5 years, and they've been taking on more and more. The partnership with Chester seems to be paying dividends as well. But we do have to recognise as an island, we're always going to be limited. And of course, one of the things that we do need is a vibrant private sector. Like, for instance, I've been raising questions about Isle Learn closing, because the message that seems to be coming back is UCM will take it on. But with everything else UCM's doing, I am concerned that things could fall through the cracks.
OK, well, I understand one half of Isle Learn apparently is, I think it's Anne Shim,
yes,
starting on her own.
Which is good news.
Very good news. Thanks for being with us today. As usual, we got through about 10% of it, so we'll hopefully see you before Christmas. Thanks for being
anytime,
with us.
Andy.
Thanks for being with us. Dave and Ashford, MHK, and if you want to follow up, by all means, email manninline@manxradio.com, call 682-631. Open line tomorrow on Mannin Line, and on Friday, the man who's been making those videos all about the state of Douglas. I know for a fact he hates making them. They're very good videos, but Charles Gard doesn't like criticising Douglas and criticising heritage. So you can talk to Charles Gard on Friday about the videos and the state of some of the buildings around Douglas and the Isle of Man in general. Thanks to Chris Quirk on the phones today. We're back tomorrow.